a chat to you about What3Words. It's something that I started to, or I found in 2019. I sort of came across it one day and I just thought, this is brilliant. So I'm just going to go do a short talk about how I use it, how other people use it, and I will admit now that it's fairly biased towards the UK, but I suspect that you could probably use exactly the same situations throughout the world. I guess to start with, have you all used What3Words, or have you heard of it even?
I heard from you and I tried it, but I got a UK Google Maps version, and I decided to follow you when possible, so I don't mix and misinterpret things with my Google Maps.
Okay, so let's make a move, and I'll apologize that it's not going to just be the plain blue anymore. So hopefully you can now see that has changed. So this was a talk that I first gave to what my daughter calls my old man's club. So I'm a member of an organization called Probus, which is worldwide, but not many in the US for some reason. Lots in Canada and all over the rest of the world. My daughter calls it my old man's club. I'm the youngest in my local club by about 10 years, so I suspect she's right. So I first gave it to them. I then gave the same. I've given talks to other people as well. And so let's get started. So as I say, this was something that was written initially about the UK, but I think applies to anywhere. So in the UK, we've had addresses for hundreds of years and postcodes. So Peggy and Bob, you'd have zip codes. So postcodes for us started rolling out at the end of the 50s. So you'd imagine it would be quite easy to find places in the UK. So if you have a person's address or a sat nav, or you've been there before, it's all quite straightforward. When you get to the street, you know that, for example, number 24 is likely to be between numbers 22 and 26. So all very simple. Or is it? You know, you would kind of hope that it would be fairly straightforward. But I suspect I'm going to show you some examples, and I suspect you will be able to show me even better examples of where that situation doesn't quite work. So here's a map of a place. It's about 6 miles from me, I think. And in 2019, when I had just learned about What3Words, I was doing a project where I was teaching older people how to use technology. And I had this gentleman who asked me how he could find his house better, or how he could tell other people to find his house better. He knew where he lived, but nobody else knew where he lived. This road, not sure which one you're able to see. I've got 3 maps at the moment. I don't know which one you can see my mouse on, if any of them. But there is a road going from sort of top right to bottom left that Jim lives on. And people call it Stebbing Road, but it's not officially called Stebbing Road. And he would have lots of people phoning him up from engineers and gas people, etc., saying, I can't find your house. All I can see in front of me are fields and trees. Where do I go? And of course, if you look at that situation, it is not very straightforward to find that house there, which is sort of halfway down that road. There are 2 houses there no other houses around. It's on a road that people call Stebbing Road, but nobody else does. And his postcode does not help anybody to find him. So that's a problem. We'll come back to that one. Alternatively, this. Nobody is allowed to say that looks like a very nice lake because it's in Scotland, so it's a loch. And again, there's no postcode that would find this particular place. So again, bit of a problem. Equally, how easy would these be to find? You know, a very small gravestone in a very large graveyard. Again, it's a bit of a problem. So I'm going to show you a clip. It's only probably about 20-second video, which we'll come back to. So I've been saying that things like this are difficult for me, you know, things that which can allow me to find places easily is great. But for some people, it is a major issue if you can't find them exactly. So let me just show you, and hopefully you can hear this. I'm just thinking that there is audio with this, and I do wonder if I have got audio on this. Let me try it at first. If it works, great. If not, I'll tell you what he says. Okay, I'll tell you in a second. So fortunately, it was short, so I don't feel too bad. But that gentleman was saying, according to the UN, billions of people still live without an address. The economist Hernando de Souza said, without an address, you live outside the law. You might as well not exist. So me complaining about not being able to find somebody's house is kind of pales into insignificance compared with people who don't have an address, and therefore they just don't exist outside, well, as far as the authorities are concerned. So here's an example where I suspect there are all sorts of problems. A favela in Rio de Janeiro, where you can imagine that there are absolutely no street names except for any big streets, and therefore difficult for people to actually get hold of the right person if they need something delivered, collected, or whatever. And in case I don't mention it later, do remind me, there is something similar in South Africa where they have the same sort of issue as well in some of the slums there. So we'll come back to that, I hope. So just moving on a little bit, these countries, 3, 6, 8 countries, all have something in common. Now, your geography is probably a lot better than mine. Mine's rubbish, so I have them noted down. And from the right, we're talking about St. Martin, Kiribati, Tonga, the Solomon Islands, Mongolia, Djibouti, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire. They all have something in common. And I'm guessing you're all very clever people, so I'm sure you probably have already worked out what the link is likely to be. So I thought I'd do a little bit of a background about What3Words and how it came about, because I think it's really quite an interesting story. That the guy in the video is a man called Chris Sheldrick. And in 2012, Chris worked for a music company, I think based in London. And he used to arrange for equipment and bands to be delivered to specific places around the world for concerts and things like that. And apparently he had multiple examples of people phoning him up from different countries around Europe and the world, telling him that they were at one venue when in fact they were supposed to be at another one. So they might be somewhere 100 kilometers north of Rome, but in fact they should have been 100 kilometers south of Rome. So this was a big problem for him. So he tried to give them latitude and longitude coordinates. He also tried to give them GPS coordinates of where they're supposed to be going. And while these are fantastically accurate, a mistake inputting those digits into any sort of device could mean that the truck is even further away or even in a different country. Those coordinates, by the way, are the address for my house. So I had to look that up because I had no idea what it is, but that's me. That snappy title there is mine. So he had this major issue. He had drivers and trucks and equipment going to lots of wrong places. And so he ended up one day, he met a friend for a beer, and his friend fortunately was a mathematician. And between the two of them, they managed to prove that alcohol can be useful for some things. So they were discussing the issue. And between them, they somehow determined that the world can be split into 3 meter by 3 meter squares. So every part of the world could be covered by a 3 by 3 meter square. What that would mean.
I gotta go to the bathroom and get it. Oh no, here's one right here.
Hello, Molly. So
Me.
if you're going to split the world into 3 by 3 meter squares, that means that you have 57 trillion squares to cover the Earth. And I think that sounds like a big number, but I ended up just writing it out because I just couldn't believe just how many zeros I needed to write it out. So 57 and 12 zeros is how many squares you'd need. They then worked out, well, how do we actually give an address which would tell somebody how to get to a particular 3 meter by 3 meter square? And so they worked out that if they used 40,000 words in groups of 3, that would give them 64 trillion combinations, which would be enough to cover every 3 meter square on the planet. So any specific place on the planet could be covered by 3 words. And so that's how What3Words came into being. For those that don't know it, it's a website, so what3words.com, and it's a mobile app called, unsurprisingly, What3Words. It's available for Android and Apple, and it's free to use. So an example of a What3Words address. So here's an example. This is taken from the web version of it. And I'm hoping with the wonders of modern science, if I click on this, it should open What3Words. Hopefully you can all see that. And if I just change it to the map. So what we're looking at is a Google map, which is overlaid and being used by What3Words. And you'll see that this address of Inform Prawn Conqueror is actually the address for near enough the front door of or the side door of our church. If I wanted to, I could click on another square and you'll see that the address has changed. It is another very specific 3-word address which only exists in one place, and that place is just beside the door of the church. So it becomes something that it can be really useful for some people. In the case of our church, you know, it's a big building. Chances are that people are going to see it and, you know, can find it. But as we'll see later, there are uses within the church, and I'm hoping to try and get them to use What3Words a bit more. So if I actually, before we do, I'll just show you as well. So we have, for example, we have a car park. So if people say, well, where's the car park? Then I could give them a What3Words address, which will take them in their car. It will take them exactly to the entrance to the car park. If we had somebody in who was, oh, you're seeing the slides, not okay, apologies. Right, let me show you this one. Sorry. Ruined. So so that's where we started off. I was on, that was the address for a particular place, but I could have changed it to something else. The nice thing about What3Words is that you can actually, depending on the size of the thing, like a building, you can decide what you want the address to be. So if I, for example, clicked in the middle of the roof of the church, I could say the address for the church is Flushy's Trifle Factoring. That's not a very easy thing to say to somebody over the phone. So I end up just sort of choosing ones which I think are easy to repeat. So that's the one I've got saved, protects, hugs, bends. So that's the one I would give to people. And it makes it nice and easy where you can do something, use something where you can decide what address you want to use. So we have this where you can absolutely select an address, a particular square. On the screen, you might just be able to see that there are lots of very pale white line or squares on there. So each of these, as I move the mouse around, you should see that the square is moving to somewhere else. So that's where our vicar lives, you know, so I could give an address for his house. Scarecrow Symphonic Albatross, I must tell him that. He'll appreciate that sort of address. So I can be very specific, as I say. I can choose where I want to people to be told of the address. I'm just going to hopefully change back again. Hopefully that has now moved back to the slides, where I can see how people can use it, but who's using it. Now, in the UK, lots of people are using it. So I suspect this number has gone up, but 80% of the emergency services in the UK were using it. So if there was a car crash on a country road, somebody could say, here is my What3Words address, rather than, well, we went through this town and then we turned up this lane and we drove for about 2 miles up there. Or I was walking through a field having parked in a car park, and you know, somewhere I fell over and I can't walk anymore. So the emergency services use it extensively. In the UK, we've got lots of delivery companies now are using it. So you can say to DHL, here's my What3Words address. So in my case, not necessary, because I've got sort of ordinary house with a number and a road, etc. But for some people, they might say, if I'm not going to be in, I'd like you to put the package at this location here, which might be round the corner from the house, you know, behind something else. So gets used a lot. In the UK, we have Every, which used to be called Hermes. I don't know whether they're anywhere else in the world. We've got DPD also using it as well. One which is more than the UK are the UN. So the UN are using it to geotag photos of disaster areas. There's a few car manufacturers now using it. So Mercedes, Ford, Subaru are using it. In the case of Mercedes, I know that you can, I believe, just say to it, navigate to, and then give it the 3 words, and it will just navigate you to that 3 meter by 3 meter square. So it is very effective for them as well. In the UK, our national rail network use it just to be able to monitor where things have been put in sidings and things like that. So again, it's very useful for some people. And before I forget, I showed you earlier that favela, as I believe they're called, in Sao Paulo, I think it was. But I mentioned that in South Africa, they've had the same problems with trying to find people. And apparently, in some of the slum areas in South Africa, what they found was that pregnant ladies who needed to go to hospital, they would call an ambulance. And there were times when it took 2, 3, 4 hours for an ambulance to get to the lady because they didn't know where she was. She didn't have a proper address, and it became a real problem. In South Africa, they introduced What3Words. And so these ladies who needed to get to hospital were able to just phone for an ambulance, give the address, the What3Words address, and the ambulance would get straight to them. So it worked really well for them. So who else is using What3Words? Well, probably not going to be terribly surprised by me saying, well, there's countries such as St. Martin, Kiribati, Tonga, the Solomon Islands, Mongolia, Djibouti, Nigeria, and the Côte d'Ivoire. So these are all countries which have never had a postcode or zip code system. And rather than try and introduce one, they've just gone straight to What3Words. So apparently you can just address a letter to, Patrick Wittick, host names, OnEBoard, Mongolia, and it would get to me. So it's quite a massive difference for them in terms of what they're doing and how they've decided to tackle the problem. And of course, it's a lot easier for them to just sort of go to What3Words and buy in a system than to come up with their own zip codes or postcodes. So I mentioned that one of the places was Mongolia. Well, that apparently this is just a screenshot from one of the What3Words videos. That apparently is a What3Words address for a place which is just outside Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia, where you could get exactly to it. You'll see on this screenshot that at the bottom there is interim shrouded shoebox, so an English address. And at the top right, there is one which I can only assume is Russian of some description. But What3Words is available in, I believe it's 50 languages at the moment. So if I'm a French speaker, I could use it in French, and I could get to exactly the same places as me using the English version of the application. So when might we use What3Words? Well, if, for the sake of argument, you're trying to find a particular house. In the UK, I think I started off saying it's usually quite easy to find houses. We usually have something like 24 Acacia Avenue and then a postcode, as we call it. But I know a few people that for some reason don't actually have house numbers. So I think hopefully this time I've done it right. You can now see a What3Words map. This is a friend of mine who lives in a village not far from me, and she lives in High Street. And this village, Stebbing, isn't very big, but the High Street is a very long street. And her address is Fairview, High Street, Stebbing. No numbers. Whenever she has deliveries, they absolutely hate her because they cannot find her house, because they don't know where to go, whether it's beginning, middle, end of the street. So in her case, I've been able to say to her, well, give people your address, which is going to be exclusive wheels. No, missed it. Exclusive wheels solving. That will take any delivery driver exactly to your door. So it makes her life easier. It makes the delivery drivers' lives much easier. So I think everybody loves it. Let me go back and good. That seems to be working. I mentioned before about trying to find particular things. I was saying about how I'm hoping that we could use What3Words down at the church. And again, so we have people that come to the church saying they're looking for a grave, a particular grave. And we've got quite a long list of where people are buried. But it's really quite difficult to explain to somebody how to find a grave. You know, our graveyard, let me zoom out a bit, isn't that huge, but it's still quite difficult to try and find where a particular grave is. So what I'm wanting to do is spend far too much time actually going around and finding what the What3Words addresses are for the graves. So I mentioned before, it's a 3 meter by 3 meter square. So if I gave somebody that address, you can probably see that it might cover a couple of gravestones, but it will get the person very, very close to where they wanted to go to find their loved ones or their ancestors' grave. So that's my hope, is that it will make life a lot easier for everybody, particularly our church administrator, who ends up having to go out with people, and it's always raining when that happens, to try and find the graves of their loved ones at the moment. So we can make life easier again for everybody. And back to this one again, hopefully. People who need help. Well, I think I probably gave this one away earlier when I mentioned about how you might end up being in absolutely a really difficult place to try and describe to somebody. So I think I mentioned about a field or whatever. So this is a forest not far from us. At the weekends, there's always lots of people there. But if I was going for a walk, you know, down here, I had a dog with me for the sake of argument. Dog ran into the trees, running after some deer, and I fell over and broke my ankle. And there was nobody around. And I phoned somebody. I phoned the phoned for an ambulance. They said, "Well, where are you?" Well, in the past, I might at best have been able to say, well, you know, I parked somewhere over here, and then I walked somewhere around here, and then I turned right into the forest at one point. You know, they're not going to thank me. They're not going to find it easy to find me. Whereas if I say to them that I'm at, well, for the sake of argument, I'm there, and I can tell that I'm there from my phone. So if I open the What3Words app, it will tell me exactly where I am at any time. So I can then just say to the ambulance people, I'm at compounds Worthy Heath, and they will find me. So again, yet another situation where it becomes much easier as a result of having What3Words. So we have the situation. I don't know whether it's the same worldwide, but our roads are quite often absolutely appalling. We've got these big potholes in the roads, and it's quite difficult to say to the council, you know, it's on such and such a road, because that road might be 12 miles long, and you need to be quite specific as to where the issue is. Again, I can just open the app. I can say, here's the exact address. Now you don't have an excuse not to try and come and fill it in. We might also have situations where refuse has been dumped. And again, here in the UK, you can phone people to come out and collect it, and I could give them a very specific address, so they could immediately get to it. So, do you remember the house in the middle of nowhere, where we had that house there, one of two houses? Well, the gentleman who I've been talking to when I was doing this project in 2019, who had said to me, how can I find out or find an address which I can give to people? Well, by a massive coincidence, the same day that we were talking about What3Words, Jim left the training session and he forgot his iPad. So I ended up phoning him up to say thank you very much for the present, and it transpired that he didn't actually want to give me his iPad. He'd just forgotten it. So he said, well, how will I get it back again? And I said, well, let's test how well this What3Words thing worked, how well it works. I will come and find you, because we'd worked out what his What3Words address is. And so I ended up going to, or following the instructions. The What3Words address you can use to navigate to places. As you can probably see at the top left, there is a thing there saying navigate. It will link in with various choices, so you could use it with Google Maps, for example, or Waze, or other things as well. So I used it in conjunction with Google Maps, and it took me exactly to his front door. It was amazing just how well it worked. So that's what got me absolutely sold on it. And where's my mouse gone? Let me go back to this one. Yeah, and show this one instead. So I showed you a picture of a loch in Scotland. Well, it's probably the second most famous loch in Scotland. For some reason, Loch Ness is probably more famous because we have a monster living there, of course. So this is Loch Lomond, which used to be about 20 minutes from where I grew up. So beautiful part of the world. And it's easy. I'd taken this picture right on the edge of the loch, looking up towards Firkin Point, as you can probably see at the very top left. Again, if somebody had said to me, well, whereabouts did you go to take that exact photo? I would have always struggled to be able to tell them, but with What3Words, I can do that. It's all very straightforward. And even if I don't remember it at the time, I can then go back to the map, and I could look at it on the map and say, oh yeah, that's where I was, and then give somebody the address. And I'm going to now say thanks for listening. And I'm coming to you from Zone Edit Swoop. And that's the easier way. I gave you my GPS coordinates earlier for this house. I think that Zone Edit Swoop is a little bit easier to cope with for most people. Finished.
That is really